Welcome to our tutorial. In this video, we will cover the assembly and installation of the power rail for the RPS 1600 central office equipment. In the field, you should calculate about 60 to 90 minutes for the assembly and installation of the power rail. Check your tools before we begin. Besides the power rail package, you will need a small flathead screwdriver and a Phillips PH1 and PH2 screwdriver, a crimping tool and 2.5 square millimeters ferrules, a wire cutter and cable ties, and a multimeter. We start with the assembly of the frame, which consists of a pair of rack brackets, a pair of front panel brackets, a pair of DIN rail brackets, and a set of screws with lock washers. In the first step, we adapt the frame to fit in the rack system. You have to choose the position of the rack brackets according to your rack system. For the 19-inch rack system, position the short legs of the rack brackets facing forward and the long legs facing the back. For the RFT-C rack system, like in our case, position the long legs facing forward and the short legs facing the backside. With the right rack system in mind, we can begin with the assembly of the power rail frame. Attach the front panel bracket to the rack bracket by means of 2 screws and washers. Now mount the DIN rail brackets to the rack brackets. The inner side of the bracket has to face backwards. Tighten the brackets by means of 2 screws and washers. Finally, we can connect the cable guide with the rack brackets. Make sure that the inner side of the cable guide faces the front with the narrow edge at the top. 4 screws and washers are required on each side. We proceed with the assembly of the DIN rail. The DIN rail package consists of the DIN rail, 12 4A and 1 32 ampere circuit breakers, 12 ground modular terminal blocks, 6 small feed-through terminals and 1 large feed-through terminal, 1 phase rail, 1 red jumper bar and 2 gray jumper bars. Clamp the first 4A circuit breaker at the left end of the DIN rail, sitting closely to the notches. Secure it with the yellow locking slide. Place 1 terminal block on the right of the circuit breaker without clearance. The terminal block connects to the DIN rail via a metal hook. Tighten the screw of the terminal block to lock the hook to the DIN rail and check the connection for tightness. Now mount the remaining terminal blocks to the right of the grooved markings on the DIN rail without any clearance to the marking and tighten them. Insert and lock the remaining circuit breakers to the left of each terminal block without any clearance. Connect the output of the circuit breakers using the phase rail and lock the corresponding screws. Don't forget to check the connection for tightness. Finally, mount the feed-through terminals on the DIN rail by snapping them in. Place the large feed-through terminal at the last circuit breaker with the cover plate attached. Now mount the small feed-through terminals without any clearance to the large feed-through terminal, finishing with the cover plate. Connect the large feed-through terminal with the small ones using the red jumper bar. Connect the small feed-through terminals with the gray jumper bars, 1 at each end of the terminal row. The DIN rail is now complete and we can proceed with the installation at the rack. The following tools will be required to install the power rail at the rack: the crimping tool and 2.5 square millimeters ferrules, the wire cutter and cable ties, the multimeter, and a set of power cables. Pay attention to the grounding. The cable guide has 2 grounding terminals which can be used if the rack is not grounded. The grounding is always mandatory. We start the installation with the cage nuts. For a 19-inch rack, insert the cage nuts with a distance of 2¼ inch. In our example, which uses an RFT-C rack, the distance between the cage nuts is 100 millimeters. Proceed with the installation of the pre-assembled frame. Lock the frame with 4 screws. Now we prepare the wiring of the power rail. Take the power cables from the left or the right of the power rail frame and thread them through the top recess of the cable guide. Place the power cables on the lower leg of the cable guide. Strip 400 mm of each cable and secure the cables at the edge of the insulation using the cable ties. Please make sure that the power cables remain close to the cable guide. The brown cable core is fed through to the right along the cable guide. You are ready to hang up the pre-assembled DIN rail. Lock the screws on both sides. Don't forget to use the washers. Before we connect the power cables, we have to shorten them to the appropriate length. Measure the distance from the lower leg of the cable guide. Shorten the yellow-green cable core to 95 mm and seal the ends with ferrules. The blue cable cores are shortened to 75 mm and sealed at the ends with ferrules as well. Now connect the blue core cables to the circuit breakers and the yellow-green core cables to the terminal blocks. Repeat this procedure with each of the 12 power cables. Connect the brown core cables to the small feed-through terminals on the right-hand side. Finally, connect the 48-volt access line. Strip 150 mm of the access line, seal with ferrules. Thread the access line through the top recess of the cable guide. Secure the cable at the lower leg of the cable guide. Connect the blue core cable to the 32 ampere circuit breaker and the brown core cable to the large feed-through terminal. The circuit breakers are now ready to be switched on. Before you switch on the main 32 ampere circuit breaker, make sure that you have the correct voltage of 48 volts. Apply the multimeter at the negative pole of the main circuit breaker and the positive pole of the large feed-through terminal. If the voltage is correct, you can switch on the 32 ampere circuit breaker. The last step of the installation is mounting the front panel on the power rail. The screw can be locked manually. Congratulations, you have successfully installed the power rail for RPS 1600.